Okay. Oh, thank you.
And then we gotta redo it for the final. Yeah, especially color coded.
Oh, is this mine too?
Yes, that's your cheat sheet for the write-up.
Oh, awesome. That's cool.
It's your third time doing your cheat sheet?
At least,
He said it's helpful.
yeah.
Really quick question. I know we got to start in a second here. Someone
Oh, good, you're gonna,
to rent the property.
you're gonna,
Does the school district use money for that, or does that they still collect some?
They don't get any, it always goes to the state anyways.
Oh,
So when it's,
okay.
it just reduces what the state has to allocate. And then they will take it.
That was my question. Thanks.
so we suck that she'll read it.
That's your cheat sheet right there. I have cheat sheet.
Is everyone ready?
Doesn't show the page though.
All right. It is 6 p.m. on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. We'll call the special meeting for the City Council to order. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Curley?
Here.
Councilmember DeMonico?
Here.
Mayor Kleinfeld?
Here.
Councilmember Shadlick?
Here.
All right, moving on to the hearing of the public. The hearing of the public is now open. Would anyone wish to be heard? Anyone wish to be heard? Seeing none, the hearing of the public is closed. We'll go on to unfinished business. Item A, introduction and first reading of ordinance number 24-1236 for fiscal year 2024-25, appropriations and tax levies.
Mr. Mayor? Oh, can't hear us?
Scoot up. Can you hear me better now?
I was kind of figuring we might as well do that at the end. If we had any questions about anything, it'd be answered, and then we can do that at the end. So I guess I just motion to move unfinished business A to the end of new business.
Support? Please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilmember Shadlick?
Yes.
Councilmember Curley?
Yes.
Mayor Kleinfeld?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
All right, we'll move into new business then. Item A is the library budget. I know we have our director here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The library is in good shape financially. I hope you saw that in the budget. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
I didn't have any questions on the library budget. Does it, anyone else?
I don't have any questions for the library.
Okay, Ms. Walton, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, thank you.
Oh, I didn't have a question, but I saw the fun article with David Bonnier that you did.
Yes, that was wonderful.
Yeah, that he came by and checked things out. I guess throughout the whole county, he was checking out all the libraries and.
He talked to all the library directors, but Eastpointe or East Detroit holds a special place in his heart because this is where he grew up. So we spent well over an hour talking at the library. And this will be a series of articles, so that was the first one.
Nice.
Yes.
So, yeah, good highlight for our library.
Absolutely, and for the city.
And just as an honorable mention, this is our last budget with Sue, and she's retiring next month. So we thank you for your service, and it's been an honor to work with you.
Well, it has been a fantastic run, let me tell you. 1984, there was a card catalog back then. I didn't have any children. I now have 3 grandsons, and I don't know how many computer systems we've gone through in that time, probably 7. So lots of changes, and the library is in a good place right now, and I'm excited for my next chapter, and the library will continue doing great things under new leadership. So,
Congratulations.
thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on to item B, Economic Development and DDA Budget. Ms. Walton?
Yes, we have Ian McCain here to represent the Economic Development Department. In our write-up, that is on pages 96 and 97, and then the line item detail, Economic Development is on page 39, and DDA is on page 55. Hi, Ian.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and members of council. Thanks for having me this evening. Just want to highlight a few areas, both of the economic development as well as the DDA budget, just to reiterate the importance of the department and some of the things we've accomplished and hope to continue working towards in the next budget year. Community and stakeholder engagement, I think, as we strongly uplifted at the last meeting, both within the Kelly plan as well as we go through the updates to our master plan and our Parks and Rec master plan will be a cornerstone of work within economic development, but also with the community engagement manager and volunteers in the community. So that's something in particular I want to highlight that'll be particularly important moving forward. Business retention and expansion, something we've been having a lot of conversations about recently in the city manager's office, how we can attract new businesses, and also within the master planning process, and hopefully also later in the year, creating an economic development strategy, figuring out what kinds of businesses community members want to see come into the community, as well as looking at ways that we can partner with entities like the library and business support organizations to grow businesses organically in Eastpointe. We continue to work towards the recertification process within the MEDC's Redevelopment Ready Community Program. The master plan is a part of that, economic development strategy, and a number of other pieces. I did just recently send over to the city manager an updated overview of our vacant properties, vacant for sale and for lease. So continuing to update, look at that, see where property owners are at and how we can help get any of the vacant properties or for lease or for sale properties occupied. And then, one of the big things we focus on within economic development is grants. So, we've been awarded and have worked on a number of different grant proposals, but one of the things I'll highlight in particular is the award of our CDM fellow, John Kraus. He's been an incredible asset to the team, and though we'll be very sad to see him go in mid-August, the amount of energy and enthusiasm and knowledge and capacity that he's added to the department has been indispensable. So expect to hear hopefully a few more grant announcements from his work before the end of his tenure and maybe even a few after. Moving into the DDA budget, as you know, we are in the process of next meeting having a public hearing, after which hopefully you all will approve the amendment to our DDA development and TIF plan. But just, again, kind of giving a high-level overview of the DDA's work, some of the things that we're focusing on. I want to uplift the first point under design goals and objectives, and that's to improve the overall appearance and function of downtown buildings and streetscapes. Moving on to promotion goals and objectives, working with those local business support organizations like we talked about earlier to start and grow businesses, as well as promoting special and seasonal events and activities within the downtown. Hopefully you all have heard, it's the second year of us bringing back our summer concert series, so we're super excited about that. Hopefully we'll see you all there. Economic restructuring goals and objectives, implementing creative redevelopment concepts for underutilized projects. So one of those I'm sure a lot of folks would like to see that we're working on is the big boy properties. So moving on to board goals and objectives, something that we joined recently that has been a huge benefit is the Michigan Downtown Association. So we went through a few of their online trainings and plan to continue on in their series of trainings into the fall. And then, the last point, drives home the importance of the DDA development and TIF plan amendment. And, you know, we are continuing to work with the DDA to come up with the matching funds for the revitalization and placemaking, or RAP 2.0 grant that we were awarded to create Civic Point, which will be a community gathering space behind the Memorial Library. And last but certainly not least, administration is working on hiring one part-time staff member to manage the maintenance around the district. I believe that's a pretty good summary of economic development in the DDA, but I'm happy to take any questions that you have at this time. Thank you.
All right, does anyone have any questions?
I'll jump in, a couple quick questions. How many concerts were we planning on doing for the DDA concert series?
So there is 7, if you count all of them. So 4 of them will be here at City Hall. Then there will be one at Eastpointe High School as part of the Gratiot Cruise. There will be one at the library. And then Rockin' Summer Nights we included as part of the series as well that Rare hosts at Kennedy Park.
Awesome.
Yep, some returning acts like Shamrock and Soundproof, some new ones like Denise Davis and the Motor City Sensations Band. So should be a good lineup and a fun time for all.
And then I think one more boring question for sure, but something that I know was always talked about when I was at least liaison on DDA, I see the grass and snow removal went down drastically. Do we change how we're doing that then? 'Cause it looks like it was 80,000 a couple years ago. Now it's down to 40,000. Are we doing that differently?
Yeah, so I think that's part of a change with the updated the contracts, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, Mariah, want to jump in, but.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. And
Sure.
Councilmember, yes, the DDA is going out back to the format where there was a DDA ambassador, a part-time person that would come and do the trash and visit the different businesses. So that is what we're planning moving forward.
So that reduced though the grass and snow budget for the
Oh,
DDA?
what?
I guess
Grass
it
and
was
snow.
just very bottom of page, well, I guess I'm on the line item.
So that's in the building and site maintenance, so they were charged, like, we had JJ Mish that was going through, and they would pick up trash and everything in the district. And so they would charge us per hour to do that work on a regular basis. I think it was like 20 hours a week that they were going out to do that work. So the DDA had motioned, actually, I believe it was last year, to hire the part-time employee to do that work, build the relationships within the DDA, so it did reduce the cost of having the contractor complete the work.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
And I just had one, this is probably for Randy. If we hire, or if they hire an individual, I assume, would you handle sort of the employment paperwork for the DDA?
Correct. They'd still be a city employee, just assigned to the DDA, charge there.
Okay, that's what I was curious about. So are they like subject to the civil service rules
Yep.
and all that? Okay.
Well, they're part-time, so they
It
won't
would be a
in
part-time
civil service.
position.
Yeah. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to police, animal control, and law enforcement budget. I guess I'll kick it over to Chief Haynes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Chief,
So-
one second.
Yes.
If you're looking at your line item budget, we're on page 17 for police. And if you're in the write-up, you're on page 73. Sorry, Chief.
Okay, so I didn't have anything formally prepared. Obviously, I will answer any questions. Just in particular, obviously, this is the first budget that I've had the ability to work through here with the city of Eastpointe. And when I did come in, I know that council was very gracious and allowed us to make some changes to the existing budget that we're in now. And I'm hoping, although almost on a weekly basis, I am still getting things that I did not know existed and having to pay for them. But as we go, I'm hoping that I've got most of that tamed down. I did go through all the bills from the previous year in hopes that I'm including everything that's needed in this budget. So from there, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions about what we've submitted.
All right, does anyone have any questions?
I'd be happy to jump in again, I guess. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess first question, so I missed the meeting when we talked about animal control. I went back and listened to it, but I guess I had one question from that. It looks like, so obviously we've moved to the DPW from the police department.
Yes.
And it looks like we're gonna hire someone, it says for $20,000 a year, to be like a part-time kennel person over there instead of, how we had it at the police department where I think everybody else kind of helped do that.
Yes and no. So what we did have in place before I got here was we did have a couple of the service aides, and when I say a couple, there was only like 2 or 3 that were actually assisting. They were trying to assist and help out, but we had some other issues that came up with using them in that position. So what we did when we transitioned down to the DPW garage, what we would like to have is actually one of the service aides that we have would probably be the first person to apply for that position. But we thought it would be better to have somebody part-time dedicated to the animals because not only have we increased the number of kennels that we have, which takes a lot longer than, you're talking pulling somebody off the shift for probably 3 hours to clean the amount of kennels and stuff that we have, and it's just not conducive to doing both. So that's why we asked for a part-time kennel attendant to help manage the kennel while the animal control officer is responding to runs.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, one thing I would like to point out is there were 2 officers moved out of drug forfeiture into general fund. The drug forfeiture is running out of money and the forfeiture laws have changed, making it harder to do that. So there is an increase in the general fund for those 2 officers offset by the drug forfeiture decrease.
Okay. I did notice just in the write-up, we still have a director of public safety listed as staffed. I don't know if perhaps we can change that before the final version. Right. Does anyone else have any questions?
Sure, I guess one more question, Mr. Mayor. We were budgeting for 1 additional patrol officer too, as your recommendation, well, as Mrs. Walton's recommendation?
Yes.
I guess, council, I think we've done this in the past, just potentially made motions as we go along here if we thought necessary. I was just looking, at the budget as a whole, and I think just in general, I think the budget's gone up quite a bit, quite quickly, I think, for the police department, and I was going to propose, at least I was gonna propose a motion that we stay at the same amount of patrol officers and not increase that budget by 1, especially with some of the other increase in costs that'll be yearly, like the kennel part-time worker and also the flock cameras that were passed and things like that.
Does anyone else on council want to respond to that? I tend to agree at this point. I think I go with some of the expenses that have come through. And I also know we're basically splitting our chiefs into 2 separate positions, which was formerly 1. But do you want to speak to that request?
I would like to speak to it. In reality, I would be asking you for 4 officers. I don't have enough officers to patrol the streets with the type of crime and the incidents that we're handling right now. The reason I only asked for 1 is because obviously I realize that I've also asked for 2 officers to be brought out of the drug forfeiture funding and to be put into the general fund. So I look at that, I looked at it from a budget perspective, is I'm really asking you for 3 officers, right? Because my general fund budget is moving up the equivalent of 3. So I reduced my ask to 1 to try to cover some of the shortages that we do have. I mean, we have an overtime budget, but we are struggling to maintain, enough officers on the road. There are certain days where I only have 3 officers on the road and I need 6. So that's what I'm trying to do is slowly, incrementally move up as the budget can handle it. Thank you.
Ms. Walton, did you want to speak to it?
I'd agree with Chief. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving me the opportunity. It's something that we've certainly talked about, and I know that every year it's something, adding staff is very difficult. It's something that we've had conversations and being aware when we do make recommendations, especially for the legacy costs and how expensive they are. I will say, even in working with Director Ruhi previously, we have tried many different tactics, whether it's offering overtime, even just getting officers into the subdivisions to address speeding. We have tried many things, but Chief Haynes, especially since he's been here, has been hit with grave difficulty in being able to staff his shifts, which is why I did support adding the one additional officer to ensure that we do have a substantial amount, or at least enough officers that are on the streets to ensure the safety of the community. So I do support the recommendation of one. I do also understand the concern with budget and being fiscally sound, but I do stand by the recommendation and support Chief Haynes in recommending the additional officer.
Any other comments?
I think just my only other comment was we did increase by 4 officers just before COVID. So yeah, this would be like an additional one on top of that. I don't know. I guess that would be, if no one else has anything to say, I'd at least like to make that motion then, that we remove the 1 extra patrol officer.
I guess my concern, just listening to Chief, is that he's saying that he wants to make sure our streets are, the way I take it, is as safe as possible. I don't want to see officers overburdened. And I know that's a job where you have to be alert at all times because you have to make split-second decisions. So for me, if our budget can handle it, and I understand trying to be fiscally responsible, but if there's a shortage of officers out there, I don't feel like the city should, or the residents should suffer because we're not manned up enough. If there's an emergency, I want there to be adequate help out there for me. So I think I would be supportive of the additional officer, just on the safety aspect of it alone. Seems to make sense to me.
Was there support for that motion? I'm sorry.
Not yet. It was, he asked if nobody else had any other comments. And
Would we be needing to add an additional vehicle for the patrol officer?
No, there would be no additional equipment that would be.
And I hadn't asked this ahead of the meeting, which I should have. I don't know if Ms. Walton might know this, what her staffing summary was, maybe going back 5 years ago or something like that. I don't know if it's in our glossary, in our stats section.
187.
You said
It's way in the,
187?
yeah, it's way in the back. It's 28 through fiscal 16, well, for patrol officers, 28 from fiscal 16 to 19, and then 32 from 20 until now.
Okay. Well, is there any support for Cardy's motion? All right, any other questions for the police chief? I guess that's it. We'll move on. Thank you. Thank you. All right, moving on to the fire budget. Chief Marquardt. See over there.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I, like Chief Haynes, had to rearrange some things. We're still figuring out a lot of things in the budget, what belongs where. And so spent a lot of time trying to push things in. As you'll see on the budget, it looks like some things have increased substantially, such as uniform and clothing allowance. We took wherever there was uniform and clothing, and to include turnout gear, and we moved it all into uniform and clothing. So while it looks like it had about an $18,000 increase, it was just removed out of someplace else. And that holds true for many things in here. We moved around a lot of things, put them in some things into contractual services that really belonged in contractual services. We moved that. There is a section in here for radios. At the time of the budget, we weren't sure if the state was going to be implementing a portion of the radios to be this phase 2 trunking and encryption. And no one wanted to give us a date on when that was going to happen. So we decided to put that in there to at least if they decided to implement that we would be prepared to purchase handheld radios, because ours would be non-compliant and would not work anymore. Finally got an answer out of them that it's not going to start for a couple of years. So we have time to push that out and try to apply for grants along with our neighboring communities, as we did last time with Shores and Roseville, to put in one big giant grant for all communities for the fireside to get handheld radios. So, but at the time, we weren't sure. Also, we did go through our ISO recently. We haven't got the formal numbers back yet. We are losing points. We're losing points in community risk reduction. We're losing points in personnel. And it requests 3 additional personnel, which will help with that. However, you know, with that being said, when we get the real numbers back from ISO, that will really give us the clear picture on that. A lot of community risk reduction things can't be done if I only have 1 vehicle in service. I can't send them out to go and do things. Even as of yesterday, or the last week, I had 3 people working on a shift. So we are down manpower. We've only hired 1 person since 2014, and that was the fire marshal position back in 2019. We've had no increases in staffing since 2014, beyond that, actually. So we can't, a lot of training is not able to be conducted because we don't have personnel to put in the seats to fight fires, which is what I truly need. But having more personnel on shift will allow the ability to then have people, if I can't hire the overtime for people to go do like home smoke detector installs and those things, well, if I have enough guys on shift, I can send an engine with those guys to go do it. But if that's the only engine that's in service, I can't send it to go do it, just based on the fact that they're probably gonna get called away. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Does anyone have any questions?
Just one comment, maybe. It's exciting our, old ladder truck's gonna be put to good use. Saw the email you forwarded us.
Yes. Sorry, I hit send a little too soon on that first one. I was going to hit the 2 button and I hit send, and I didn't have all the names put in yet.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? Then we will, thank you very much. We'll move on to 38th District Court budget. I know we have Judge Galen here. Would you like to come up? And I know that you sent some additional materials. Did everyone on council get those? Okay.
Does anybody need a package of what we sent? Okay, well, good evening, administration, council, and Mr. Albright. I am going to start out with just some talking points, and then my court administrator, Michael McLeod, whose responsibilities are to handle the budget, I will turn it over to him. But there are a few things that I just thought were important that need to be addressed prior to me starting, so that everyone has an understanding of the difference between the police and fire budget and library versus the court. Separation of powers. The court's powers come from the Constitution, 1963. The court is a co-equal branch of government with the city of Eastpointe. And an indispensable ingredient of the concept of co-equal branches of government is that each branch must recognize and respect limits on its authorities and boundaries. Each branch must be empowered to carry out the entirety of its constitutional powers and must be afforded adequate resources to carry out its power free from interference. Funding units cannot intrude on the court's budget, operation budget, and budget is not tied to revenue. And although we have always covered our budget with our revenue, the budget is not to be tied to revenue. And my court administrator will highlight some of the reasons why revenue is going down, but it's the expectation this year that we will cover the budget. So we are basically, at this point, a self-funding separate branch of government. My understanding is the only issue that's going to be addressed tonight has to do with our magistrate. And I would submit to you that it is a reasonable and necessary expense. We have to look at the intensity of the cases that come before us. I've had 22 murders in 3 years, armed robbery, criminal sexual conduct, carjacking, delivery of drugs, assault, assault with intent to murder, drunk drivings with high BACs, child abuse, and habitual offenders. The violent crimes have gone up in our city. The volume of cases. If you look at the caseload reports and the number of cases, you will see that the cases handled by our court are very voluminous. And you will see that we were rated this past year without data as a 1.36 and a 1.4 to a 1.44 judgeship. And it's been as high as 1.8. And the question is, what does that mean? It means that it would take 1.8 or 1.4 judges to do the workload that's over at the courthouse. And I'm going to stop there for a minute to let everyone know that in the fall, they're going to start a study. And I think it's going to be an important study because they're going to do weighted points for judges around the state and for clerical. They've never done clerical. So they're going to have everybody keep track of their hours, the work that they do, and then they will give weighted points to each court so they can make recommendations that if you're, say, a 1.8 judge court, you should have staff levels of 13 clerks. They're going to make those recommendations. So that's coming down the pipe. Probably going to take a year for that to happen, but it's going in that direction anyhow. So the case volume that we have is in excess of what one judge should do, and it affects the ability to timely and efficiently process our cases. The court handles a broad range of cases from simple traffic matters to multi-defendant murder cases. And the magistrate's position is reasonable and necessary because while I'm handling more serious cases, maybe a 10-witness murder case, we have our magistrate who is handling more ministerial cases, traffic cases, show causes, arraignments. The way we have it set up, he comes in every day. He might be there an hour, he might be there 2 hours, but he takes arraignments, walk-in arraignments, scheduled arraignments, people who are arrested, and it's taken a real load off of my docket to allow me to focus on the more important cases. The defendants, litigants, and victims are entitled to a hearing within a reasonable amount of time. By not properly funding this position is going to result in delayed justice, inefficiency within the judicial system, fairness with resolution of cases, public confidence, and overall timely court cases are crucial for upholding principles of justice, fairness, and efficiency within the system. The volume of cases coming through impacts our ability to efficiently process. Again, referring you back to the caseload report. And it makes no sense to me that there is nothing to suggest that reducing resources at this point from what was already established is going to help with our reasonable and necessary expenses. What the city is asking, in essence, is that the court justify a line item that was already established. The magistrate is vital to the administration of justice. It is a reasonable and necessary expense, and the baseline has already been established. I've provided council with the minutes from the city council meeting where the magistrate position was approved, and I found the personal action form that was signed by the city manager, Mariah Walton, and myself back on April 22nd, 2022, after the position was approved. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my court administrator. I am going to remain for any questions that you may have. And with that, Michael?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Taking
go ahead.
questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did anyone have any questions?
Two quick questions I noticed, not related to the magistrate, and maybe one is more for Mr. Blum. I saw the DivDat charges. I know we talked about this for council. It seemed like it was pretty high. Are they, we like make sure we're paying the same amount, or I don't know how that
They have a separate agreement, a separate pricing schedule.
okay.
It's because it's a court, and they have to write a whole new system to tie into the 38th District Court. So it's not the simple
Yeah.
kiosk where they're paying water bills or taxes. So it will be more expensive.
All righty. And then I think I saw, there was 6,000 in here for a new walk-through metal detector. I think that we already have that, right? So,
So we, I think this past, I believe it was September of 2023, I came to the council to request a X-ray scanner machine, which we got 50/50 matching funds for. So this is a separate item. This is for, people when they walk through a metal detector. That went out this year, so we had to actually purchase that this year. We were budgeting for next year, but we no longer need that. Because we had to get that this year. We needed it, so.
so we can save that $6,000, I guess, from
Yes, we
this,
could save, we
okay.
could save that $6,000. And so if you, if you look at the packet, there are some line items requests that is not in line with what the city manager proposed or department requested in the BSNA generated budget. So if you want to, if we work back and forth, we can, so.
Well, at this point, I'd like to kick it over to Manager Walton, because I know there are some differences between what the judge is requesting and what your recommendation is. So did you want to talk about your recommendation?
I will, thank you. So I just want to clarify too, in the budget process and per scale, the funding unit has the authority to set the budget schedule. On November 4th, 2023, the court, along with every other department head, had been provided with a budget preparation schedule for the 24-25 budget. I actually scheduled a budget meeting with the court at the end of December 2023, and that was scheduled for the end of January. Two of the meetings that we had scheduled with the court were actually canceled, and so they did not participate in that initial process. We did have a follow-up budget meeting that we scheduled on February 16th, and that was actually the day that we compiled the budget to actually have the conversation, but it was already done, the analysis was done, and the actual budget book was combined. The court does have a burden of proof that they have to provide to the funding unit for increased expenses. At the meeting that we had on February 16th, the court reported that they were going to do a wage study in regards to the magistrate position. We have requested that study at this time 4 different times. We've not received the wage study for the magistrate position to state that those funds and actually received the burden of proof from the court to say that those funds are reasonable and needed for the court. And as a history for the magistrate position, back in 2022, the court actually inputted into BSNA. The department requested $175,000 for the magistrate position. City Council at that time approved $104,000 following COVID to assist with catch-up and backlog. The following year, the magistrate position was approved at $42,000. This year, $104,000 was inputted into BSNA. I have requested the wage study. I've requested the court to provide the burden of proof of the additional expenditures and the increase in that line item. That has not been provided, and that was one of the things that was changed in the line item from the budget that was input from the court to back it down to the current level of funding until that burden of proof was provided to the funding unit, saying that those funds were reasonable for the expense of the magistrate. In clarification of the path that was provided and signed, again, highlighting, as Judge mentioned, the separation of powers, I do not have the discretion to decide what is paid per hour or who is hired at the court, which is why those paths are signed. If the judge decided to pay $1,000 per hour, it still boils down to my only oversight is the budget when it comes to the court. And so you can't expend more than $42,000, and at that point, the funding unit can then say, and put the court on notice to expending too much money and overusing the budget that was allotted by City Council. So paying the magistrate $100 per hour is the judge's choice. We have not addressed that, but knowing that that is a concern, we have asked for a burden of proof, the court to provide that information with the wage study to show that that is necessary, that is a reasonable amount that is paid in Macomb County, and we have not been provided that.
May I respond to that briefly?
Sure.
The first thing is, again, I go back to the baseline was already established when we went to council asking for this position. It was stated how many hours, what the hourly would be, and that it would be a permanent position. So I've highlighted in the transcript the discussion that took place that established that. I was at one of the meeting, although the budget and the finances are the responsibility of my court administrator, I did go to a meeting, and Ms. Walton did ask for a study. We never said we were going to provide a study. It's always been the court's position. We've already established why reinvent the wheel. This is what was put before council. This is what was agreed to. This is a reasonable and necessary expense. And again, if you look at the numbers really haven't changed much. They're very high. The only thing that's changed is there's more violent crimes that need to be handled at our court. So if it was approved at that level 2 years ago, by pulling back, that is hurting the court, not helping the court, and not getting us to a point where our reasonable and necessary expenses are covered. So I just wanted to say that, and again, if you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer them. But I stand behind the request. I thought Mr. McLeod was going to go over some of the reasons why revenue is down, but really that's a side issue. And again, our budget should not be tied to revenue. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McLeod.
Yes.
And I have a couple questions, but I'm going to pause for a second.
Me or?
Well, I'm going to ask Ms. Walton about the previous expenses, and then I've got a list that I'm going to.
So just to clarify again, the 2022-23 budget approved, the city council approved $104,000. That was again for backlog and case catch-up following COVID. Last year's budget, so the fiscal year that we're currently in, the magistrate is funded at $42,000. That is the same amount of funding that was placed in the budget for next fiscal year is the $42,000. The court has received a grant to continue utilizing the magistrate, as in December, they had expended the funds based on the hourly rate and the amount of hours that they use the magistrate. So they've been able to supplement additional usage of the magistrate with grant funding. But currently, they are funded at $42,000 for a magistrate in the current fiscal year, and that is the same amount of money that is placed in the following fiscal year for the magistrate. We have not decrease the level of service on the funding unit side at all. We've not made that recommendation, but with the request of increasing funding back to 2 years prior, where the council approved additional expenditures for COVID and case catch-up, we asked, again, for the court to provide, as it is their responsibility for a burden of proof, to show the need to, again, increase the budget or more than double the magistrate's budget than what was in the budget for the current fiscal year and the following fiscal year.
May I respond to that?
Well, sure, go ahead.
So with regard to the amount, it was approved at 20 hours at the hourly rate. 104,000 was allocated the first year. The first year of that 104, only 11,025 was utilized. The following year, it should have been at the 104 level, but even the following year, the level of expenditures was only 73. It wasn't 104. I will address the grant. The grant did not cover the wages of the magistrate until recently. We just asked for some modification of the grant going forward, nothing previous. So the numbers that are here are the numbers that are here. And again, to reiterate, I don't want to keep saying the same thing. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. This is what we need. Our numbers have not changed to take away that level of service. It is reasonable and necessary. And when you go to the reasonable and necessary standard, that has to do with the lawsuits. If a lawsuit was filed against the city for not giving reasonable and necessary funding, then the court has to notify the state court that a dispute exists. A lawsuit must be brought 60 to 90 days. And if the parties are in mediation, 90 days. And the funding disputes at that time, they look at serviceable level, and in a lawsuit, the burden would be on the court. But I think looking at the numbers in and of themselves, the amount that was approved, the workload at our court, I submit to you that this is reasonable and necessary for the administration of justice at our court.
Thank you. Well, before we get to discussing lawsuits, so the first year you said 11,000 was used. Do you know why that was? Why?
Probably because of when it was approved and when he got started. So just happened to fall within parameters that it wasn't utilized as much as it needed to be.
And what is the actual dollar amount that you're requesting be allotted for the magistrate?
The same that we originally did, 104. And whatever isn't used will go back to the city as it has in the past.
I don't know if I'm misreading this. I see like 2024, 25 requested under, and it says 220. Do you know why that is?
I'm going to let Michael answer that. Again, the responsibility of the BSNA and all the details falls on Michael, and he has all that information because he handled it.
So there was a request for increasing for part-time wages. We would no longer want to follow through with those requests for the increases. So that's why that request is down to 220.
I see. It's the total of all
Yes,
those.
total amount of all part-time, because the magistrate is in that line item of the part-time wages.
Oh, no, I was just going straight across. I read it incorrectly. So the request is 104. Is the proposal still that it's a part-time position?
Yes, we want to keep it as is, no more than 20 hours a week. As is.
And is that kind of how our magistrate's been operating at, about 20 hours a week?
Not quite. That's why we've never met our mark on the 104. He comes in, it depends on our caseload, how many people were arrested the night before. There's scheduled arraignments where people come in. We have walk-ins, so we never know. I mean, there's been times where we've had 45 scheduled, 11 in custody.
The magistrate also signs warrants. He signed nearly 250 warrants. He's signing warrants in the middle of the night. He's also signing warrants on the weekends, providing that judicial support to the judge.
Can I ask what his hourly pay is now?
Yes, it's $100 an hour. That's what was approved. If you refer back to the transcript, it looks like there was somewhat of a wage study by councilperson Sarah Lucido, because there was discussion, and I did highlight that area, page 6 and page 7. And one thing I guess that council needs to understand is the court-appointed attorneys, they get paid hourly, 120 to 138, I think is what it is. And if they work 5 minutes, they get to bill an hour, right? If they're at court. What our magistrate has done is saved me my sleep. He charges in increments of 15 minutes when he does search warrants in the middle of the night. Council should be aware that prior to Karen Haydat, who was the court administrator, a non-attorney magistrate, would charge $150 a search warrant. And the difference between $150 and $25 is a big difference. So we have a magistrate who doesn't take advantage. We try to be fiscally responsible with the money that's there and not use it. I can't impress upon you enough the importance of this magistrate. I went through his warrants that he signed. Now, he signs warrants, I sign warrants. The worst are the ones in the middle of the night. The worst are when there's a stabbing or there's a murder, because you get multiple at different times as the police proceed with their investigations. So as I was going through magistrates' warrants that he signed, he got one at 12:30 in the morning, then 3 o'clock in the morning, and then 5 o'clock in the morning, and then he had to get up and go to work. That fractured in your sleep, I can't tell you, because I've had them in the middle of the night, is horrible, because you can't get back to sleep. It's part of the job. He takes a great burden off of me, and as I indicated, the city paid $150 per warrant to Magistrate Haydet, and our magistrate charges he charges .25 to 2.0, $25 to $40 per warrant. So I think it is a reasonable expense, and again, reasonable and necessary for our court with our caseload.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask, if I could ask Ms. Walton, what's been budgeted in years past, let's go, before Ms. Galen was judge on a magistrate?
We actually didn't have a separate magistrate. Karen Haydet served as the magistrate, and she earned $115,000 a year. That's ballpark. I think there was, some change in there. So it was $115,000, but when you add, again, this magistrate at $42,000, along with the court administrator, we've already increased costs, but you basically be over doubling the cost by adding the magistrate at the level that she's requesting and the court administrator that we do have. And for context, while I was surprised that the court wasn't willing to share the wage study after being requested, I did have a chance to call around just to get an understanding of different courts and what they do pay their magistrates. St. Clair Shores, which is right next door, pays $150 for a half a day. We're paying $100 an hour, so for a half a day, we're paying $400 in Eastpointe, while right across 94, they're paying $150 for that same half day. Farmington Hills, I spoke to their manager as well. They're paying $175 a day. So Oakland County is $25 higher than St. Clair Shores, and yet still significantly higher than here in Eastpointe. And also for context, because the conversation with Karen Haydet serving as the magistrate previously as well had come up, and how she had signed warrants and was paid a certain wage. I think it was $150 an hour for every warrant that she signed. We went back through the entire payroll through the 2019-2020 year just to verify how many of those warrants she had actually signed and covering for Judge Gerds between a health condition and in his absence, and she had only signed 40 warrants at that time. So it was less than $6,000 that she had earned during that time in serving in that same capacity that the current magistrate is serving. And so again, the city's position has been, we understand the request, but we are requesting the court to provide the documentation to show that the rate that they're paying him and the rate that they're requesting the city fund it is reasonable. Part of that is providing the wage study to show that this isn't a reasonable amount that's being paid. If we back it down to the St. Clair Shores rate, you would double the amount of hours that you would have the magistrate versus paying $100 an hour to utilize the magistrate for half the time. If you decided to pay the magistrate $1,000 an hour, you only have 42 hours, and then does the city continue to take requests to increase the amount of hours based on what you're paying him? Is essentially the question that administration has been faced with. And again, we're asking for a burden of proof. Provide the wage study so that we know that what you're paying the magistrate is reasonable and is fair and is the going rate, and then we can present that to council as this is a reasonable request from the court.
Where does the,
Okay,
sorry if I could ask one, where does the 42,000 come from? How do you calculate that?
The 42,000 is what's currently in the budget. So currently in the budget, City Council approved $42,000 for a magistrate, and that's what we recommended moving forward for the next fiscal year was $42,000. And so if you're paying $100 an hour, you get 420 hours during the year. If you split that in half, you'd get the 840 hours to utilize the magistrate. Now, if you want to expend the budget and she decides that she hires somebody that you pay $1,000 an hour, then you get 42 hours, and that's what you have is the $42,000. So the wage is not our decision, that's up to the judge, but if you're going to continue to ask to increase the funding to utilize this line item, part of that has to be we assess why are we continuing to pay this rate, and is this reasonable, and is this the going rate in Macomb County for a magistrate? Based on the calls that I was able to make just in the last day, it seems that we're paying much more than surrounding communities are paying for a magistrate.
Well, so how'd we come up with it last year, I guess, then? I mean, you're saying we put the 42 in last year, like, how did we come up with the 42,000 last year?
So the presentation last year was actually to use the magistrate on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoon. It wasn't a daily usage of the magistrate. That was the presentation to administration, and that's where the $42,000 came from. We did not have this conversation regarding the magistrate and the funding level last year during budget. This is new. We funded, it's documented in BSNA and all of your line items. It was funded at $42,000 last year. It's funded at the same thing this year, as we don't have documentation proving that this is a reasonable expense. I actually think it's a very expensive thing. I think the council was gracious to fund it at $104,000, but again, was required at the time based on COVID, a shutdown, and the extended caseload that Judge Galen was actually picking up from Judge Gertz. So it made sense to provide assistance during that time. Now we've continued, we funded it at $42,000. Why would we go back to the same funding that we provided during COVID and that significant backlog that doesn't exist today?
I would like to say that the $42,000 was a missed oversight on my end. We wanted to request the $104,000. We need to utilize magistrate to support the judge in her role as judge for the court. It is a critical function of the court. I can't say that enough. I support a judge 100% on that. We need a magistrate. Whereas Roseville has, 3 judges, we're only operating with 1. It is critical that the court has a magistrate because at that point, if we don't have the magistrate at the allotted $104,000, it will probably increase the workload of the judge and take away from hearing those important cases that she needs to deal with.
And if I can just address the numbers that City Manager Walton threw out as far as a half a day versus a full day. I know that St. Clair Shores is working on their magistrate fee schedule because, quite frankly, it's low. But that being said, if they're there for 1 minute, they get the $175. If they're there for 5 minutes, they get $175. There's a morning rate and an afternoon rate that they have. And I know this because I contacted the court. I haven't done a wage study. We didn't do it. We presented to council. They approved it as is. And now city administration is going backwards in time and trying to, like I say, recreate a wheel of a different color. So we can get into all of this, and I don't think that it's probably appropriate at this time. But if you look at the city council meeting where my magistrate was approved, the number of hours that were approved, I think, and the fact that, again, he charges for warrants in increments of 0.25, which is very fair, as opposed to Karen Haydet, who their workload wasn't as bad as our workload is now. City Manager Mariah says there was 440. He's done 241. I think he's up to 245. So there's a big difference there from when Judge Gertz was in office to when I was in office. And again, the reasonable and necessary part is we have a high increase in violent crimes. We have a bigger caseload, and I provided that information to you guys so you could see it where our numbers are, and they haven't changed to justify reducing the amount.
So I have a question. This might be for Mr. Blum. With the current year scheduled at $42,000, do we know how much has been expended, or if we're heading towards exhausting that?
I would like to point out, there's been a couple of misstatements. The first year of the magistrate, the budget was 0, and they spent $11,025. The second year was the 104, and 78,000 was spent. The current budget is 42,000. They were notified as early as September that they would run out of money by December. They were notified in January that they were out of money and they needed to quit using the magistrate. They've completely ignored every one of those notices As of April 30th, they've already spent $68,000 against the 42.
And Judge Galen, I had a couple of questions for you too. Looking at the caseload numbers that were provided to us, I believe it's still sort of trending upwards steadily, I guess. So I guess my question would be is, I know the original discussion was this person will help you get on top of COVID. I know that, you know, a lot of cases sort of piled up before you were elected. I mean, is there any kind of end in sight of seeing that actually decrease with having the magistrate there?
We've been making some great progress, but the numbers that were provided to you reflect what our caseload is. It doesn't reflect the additional cases that are backlogged that are added on to that. That's just what the numbers that come in for the year. So that being said, we have a visiting judge that is paid through a grant because we have sought outside resources so as not to be a burden on the city. And we have a backlog grant that pays for this visiting judge and 6 employees, part-time employees. And that brings me to another point. The last council meeting, there was a request for 2, possibly 3 employees, and the matter was tabled for another date. We never brought that back to council, and the reason is this. We got the grant money, we were able to cover it. That grant goes through the end of December, and then that's done. Then we'll be back in a situation where we're gonna need additional help. And again, I don't know if I've already mentioned this, but if I did, I apologize for repeating myself. But in the fall, they're gonna start a study, and they're gonna do it for judges, and they're gonna do it for clerks, so that they have a baseline of how many clerks really are needed for the caseload that is coming through a court and how many judges are needed. And it's a process. If I could wave a magic wand and bring in another judge to take some of the heat off of me, I would do it. I'm not afraid of a little bit of work. I'm not afraid of a lot of work. But at the rates that they've been going, 1.3, 1.44, 1.6, 1.8, that's above and beyond what's expected of one judge. And this helps me, and along with the visiting judge who comes in on Friday for the Zoom hearings. So sometimes we have a judge running Zoom in our jury room because we don't have a courtroom for them. And we have magistrate in the old prosecutor's office, and we have me in my court room, and all 3 of us are at work. And we're getting there, we're moving in that direction, but even if we get caught up on the backlog and we're good, I still need a magistrate. That's why it was asked back on May 11th, there was a specific question about temporary and permanent, because I did ask for visiting judges too, to help me get caught up on the backlog. I need visiting judges that aren't covered by the grant when I am not able to work. But that being said, that was a temporary position, and if you look at page 4 at the bottom, I highlighted. The magistrate position that I asked for would be permanent, part-time magistrate. That's what was approved. So that's the position that the court takes, is that position was approved. Everyone knew what the hourly was. Everyone knew the amount of hours. It's spelled forth on the personal action form, and that's what we're asking for. And again, if the money isn't spent, it'll go back to the city. And at this point, with the extra help, I don't know that it's going to, but if we need it, I don't want to have to come back to council and say, hey, we need this extra money. I think it's a fair expense, reasonable, and necessary.
Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
I'd motion that we make the magistrate line item $104,000 per year instead of $42,000 per year.
104? Even, 104 even,
Yes, sir.
instead of the full 42. I'm going to support that.
Well, I did did have a question prior to this. And I guess if it was addressed, I apologize. But I was listening to the numbers and the comparables around other communities. And I was just curious as to why, and if you stated this, I apologize, but why the rate, it seems to be about 4 times what the neighboring communities are paying in Macomb County.
Wow.
He gets $100 an hour, so I know we mentioned a half a day. So St. Clair Shores, was it 150?
175.
Or 175 for about half a day. He would, if he worked half a day, he'd get $400.
And here's the situation, he never does. So we use him as needed as opposed to paying, and 175 in the morning and 175 in the afternoon. And what do you do at night when you have warrants? 150 a
Well,
warrant at night?
No, I wasn't done with my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The remainder of my question was, why was that rate set seemingly so much higher or so much more in excess than what the neighboring communities are paying?
I don't know what the neighboring communities are, and that was addressed at the meeting, and I don't think you were on council at the time.
I was not.
Right, so it was brought up because Sarah Lucido had indicated that it was a little higher than neighboring communities. We didn't actually do that study. Ours was based on a reasonable expense. We have an attorney that comes in, he has 40 years' experience. He does it, the warrants at night for .25. And, I never thought to do this for today, but if we had figured out a magistrate every day, which is what I need at my court, let's say $400 a day, morning and night, 4, 8, 12, 16, that's $2,000 a week.
Yeah, I
Plus-
had that math already.
Yeah, lawyers are notoriously bad at math, but, and then you factor in $150 a warrant at night. It was a fair wage, and that's why it was approved. And Sarah Lucido, who is the one who brought up the issue of what the rate was, she seconded the motion.
Well, I mean, I don't want to go back and say anything about previous decisions. I guess my other question is if the wage study was asked for, why was that not provided? If it would give credibility to the request, or, so I'm just curious.
Right, and probably if that would have been raised, it should have been raised when it was in front of council way back when. We have an established baseline of where it is and how we came up with it, and I do believe it's fair. And I have checked with other judges. I don't know exactly what every place makes, but every judge that I've talked to has felt that that was a more than reasonable expense.
Well,
And if he comes in for an hour, he does a lot. He doesn't overbill for anything.
Well, and I guess more specifically, and I apologize because I didn't clarify or specify my question. I guess in regards to the budget currently, Ms. Walton said that she tried to, I guess you guys had meetings that they were trying to schedule and said that they had asked for this wage study, or if I'm calling it the right thing. So I meant more recently as opposed to not when I was on.
Right, I was involved in one meeting that I came to. Ms. Walton asked if we would do that, if we would share it with the court. We haven't done it. Because our position is, it has been what it's been for the last 2.5 years. You can look at the trends, he didn't overbill for anything, and that it wasn't necessary because we determined what was necessary.
I guess, so what gives me a little bit of confusion, I guess, is because I guess my thing is if it would strengthen, if I was in that position, it would strengthen my argument. I guess I would be more inclined to do it. So that's what makes me just kind of, wonder why it was not done and provided, especially if the city is the funding, was it agent or unit or whatever. So that's where my question comes in. Obviously I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, I'm not a magistrate, but I guess I'm just trying to understand why. I guess it seemed maybe pretty simple to do, but.
Well, and I think it strengthens my argument even further. As to how busy we are, there's times, Mr. McLeod, you can speak for yourself as to on a busy day, if you're sitting in your office, or what are you doing?
Sitting in my office, putting out fires every day. I mean, we're probably the busiest one judge court in the state of Michigan. So we have our dockets are, we experience a high volume docket every day. We have people coming in every day, questions. I'm constantly putting out fires, dealing with, just issues every day. So for me to sit down in my office for, a length of time to get things done is hard, So the only time is Fridays, Friday afternoons when, we don't have a docket or it's a slow day.
One last question. I know there was mention of visiting judges. What is the cost for a visiting judge? What does that tend to run?
Well, it depends. If they have pensions, they're limited to $400 a day by the state. If they don't have pensions, they can kind of set their own rate. We have a couple judges that we don't use because they charge too much.
So, I mean, I guess historically, and this might be a broad question, but I know since Mr. Lloyd, you do the budget, when you've had visiting judges, what typically has that cost you? What's the cost of the court?
$400 a day.
Okay, so basically you're using judges that already have pensions.
Correct.
Correct.
How many hours do they usually work for that? Is that the whole day?
Yes.
So that's actually less than the magistrate then?
Right,
So
but
they're-
if we had and here's what you have to keep in mind with the visiting judges. Because if I could have a list of visiting judges and have them there every day, I would. But the list is small. It's mostly the retired judges. We have Judge Viviano who comes in, and I think he's 87 years old. And Judge Crouchman, I think he's probably of a like age. So there's not a long list of visiting judges that we can go to. I'm not going to mention names, but there were two judges that were municipal judges that we had asked to come in, and they wanted, a lot more. And we were being fiscally responsible by saying, okay, we'll figure something else out. Because that would have cost more than $400 a day. They charge by the hour and by the mileage. And it would have just been a very big expense for the court. And not a reasonable expense, in my humble opinion.
Okay. I guess that's all that I have right now.
I have some other questions.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Sure. Oh, do you have questions? I don't know if you would track this, but would the court know the, I guess, number of cases that he moves? Do you keep any stats that kind of show how much?
That would probably be a number that could be looked at. I don't know if they would separate it that way. There's codes that you put in. I don't know if they could set it up.
If there's I could generate a report to see how many cases he's heard. So if that's something the council is requesting, I can generate that report.
If it's easy to do, if you weren't thinking to track that, I'm not sure it would be easy to separate out the cases. But if it is, I think it would be helpful.
Number of cases heard, yes, we could generate a report to provide that information.
Well, yeah, and the dockets would, at least at some point, show you how many cases were on the docket for the day. But it wouldn't include in custodies, people that got arrested over the night, over the weekend. Holiday weekends are always a big thing. But we would have our docket because we schedule in-persons and then, again, walk-ins and the in-custodies. And those are all kind of lumped together. And then we have show cause hearings and traffic matters that he handles. So he's pretty good about pushing cases through.
So the other, I guess a couple of comments that I just wanted to make sure, at least from my perspective, in terms of how much revenue is coming in or whatever, I don't think, that's not something I consider. I mean, frankly, the police department is the one who really brings in some of the revenue, but I understand the court's function, I think is, in my mind, just completely separate from that. Whether or not revenue is brought in, I understand.
I agree.
A court's required to administer justice. So, in terms of the current budget, so I look at the, I guess, wages as a part-time person for the magistrate, and I agree with you that our court is way overburdened. I think we're all very well aware of it. One of the reasons we're looking at a new building, we need multiple courtrooms to handle the amount of cases in Eastpointe. But I look at the amount, and I almost wonder if it would be better to have a full-time magistrate there to really, and I know the courtroom thing is still an issue, but.
That would be an option, but then there's the issue of benefits, and I know that that's a real sticking point with the city. So if we could create a full-time position with benefits, I guess that's something that certainly could be considered. This position is a position right now that is part-time with no benefits and a lot of work. So it's certainly something that I would consider. If the city was willing to pay for a magistrate, full-time magistrate.
Well, I think if we were able to get a wage study, that would be something I think to consider. What would be the cost of just having a full-time person? I don't know the process for asking the state for an additional district court judge, but I think we have to keep that in mind going forward.
Let me kind of touch on that. Again, it ties into the study. Roseville was weighted as a 2.2 judge court, but they have 3. We were weighted as a 1.8. There was talk about merging the two. They don't want us. Sad to say, they don't want us. So this year, these numbers that I give you, they're based on caseload. But when they actually do the weighted points where, I have to write down, I signed 4 warrants, I signed 4 orders, I had a motion for summary disposition, I had a murder exam, I had a preliminary exam, whatever it is, we have to keep track of it, and it's gonna go to the state, and then the state's gonna look at it and say, how come Judge A takes 5 hours to sign, an order, and Judge B only takes 5 minutes? They're gonna take all that into consideration. They'll weight the position for a second judgeship, and if it gets to that point, there may be some movement in that direction. I do have some other information about that with another court, but I don't know that that's gonna come to fruition, and I don't know this is the place to really put it out there, since it's not something that is a done deal. And might not be a done deal. So I'm not going to say something that is not going to come to fruition.
And I just kind of mentioned that I know we can't do anything about it. We have to ask for another district court judge. I can't imagine that we won't be weighted as needing one.
Right, but it like anything, it's a process. So I think the biggest thing when they do, and there's other things that are going on too. From what I've heard from various judges, there have been a lot of funding unit court problems because revenues are down. And there's been talk, and it's actually been through the House, but it didn't pass, to take the funding through the state, which makes a lot of sense to me, because then you get along with your city neighbors without fighting over, money. And the state court administrator's in a better position to say, okay, this is a 2-court judge, they need 18 staff, here's what our budget is for pens. I have no idea, that's, again, Michael's arena. It makes sense to do that, but with the government, things are slow. And I think at some point it might happen, but it can't happen overnight. And I think the first step is going to be this weighted point study for not just the judges, but I said the clerks too. And I think that's really important, because we did an across-the-board study, and for our numbers, we have the lowest amount of clerks with the highest volume. And like I said, that may come back before council at some point. Hopefully, we'll be in a good position when the grant ends in December, and see where we're at.
Last question, I think it's my last question. Would the court have any objection to a wage study if the city council requested that?
I would have no objection to it.
And I have no idea, does anyone know how long those?
And I don't know who would do that. Is it Plant Moran who, they could probably do,
I'm not sure either.
Right.
That's why I'm asking. Ms. Walton, do you have any idea?
I'm not certain. I mean, we have, like, in the HR profession, we have access, like on MML. We can search if a magistrate is attached to that. And just to clarify the magistrate wage study, the city did not request that at all. That was a statement in the budget meeting that the court was actually conducting the wage study, and we had asked for a copy of that. So we didn't request that to be done. We've made no mention of anything related to revenues or expenditures and what we appropriate. We've not done that. The court was conducting their own informal wage study. We've just asked for a copy of that. My understanding is that that had been completed on the court's behalf. They're just not providing that to the city.
and I will correct that, that has not been done, to my knowledge. And my recollection of the conversation was you asked if we would do it, and if I did it, would we provide it to you? And we never did it. To my knowledge, there's been no informal, formal, or other wage study, but I guess I would have no objection if council wanted to do that. That may be something that we take up for, the future. But as it stands today, I need my magistrate on a daily basis, and I don't know where the Tuesday, Thursday came along, because that's, was approved for 20 hours a week. If it was just Tuesday and Thursday, that 16 hours doesn't even make sense. But we need the services Monday through Friday. And we've been able to not use Fridays because we have a visiting judge. So nobody's taking advantage of anything. We're all trying to be fiscally responsible and, do the best that we can with what we have.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I was just saying, Ms. Walton, earlier in the meeting, you said that the city had requested the wage study, and now you're saying?
Nope, so earlier in the meeting, I've stated we've requested a copy of it 4 times. During the meeting, and Director Blum is here, Michael is also here, we were all a part of that meeting. The judge made a statement in the meeting that they were going to conduct a wage study. I was gone for obvious reasons on FMLA afterwards. It was never provided. When we came back in preparation for budget, I have asked 4 times for that wage study from the court, and it has not been provided, and I don't even receive an email response back addressing it to state that it hasn't been done. To my understanding, an informal wage study has been done on behalf of the court. And again, you can ask Director Blum, who was a part of the meeting as well. The court stated they would do an informal wage study. We did not request that. We've asked for a copy 4 times.
And let me respond to that. Again, I stand by my position. The reason I put this, the minutes together for the meeting from May 11th is because in the meeting, there was a couple of things that were represented. It was represented that this was a part-time position just to get caught up. It was not a permanent position, and I knew it to be a permanent position, but I wasn't sure. So I went back to the city council meeting and I said, yep, I was right. But it was represented during the negotiations that this is what it was and it's supposed to go away. And I said, that's not what my vision of it was, and that's not my recollection. So that being said, I don't know what good it does to go back and forth. I have my recollection of what was said. They have their recollection of what was said. And I think we're getting into the weeds and off the topic of what it is. I'm asking for the $104,000 for the magistrate and 20 hours a week. No more, not to exceed 20 hours a week.
And well, in terms of the hours, I think that's just up to you, If you end up using them heavy at the beginning of the year or something, I don't care anyway. It's just about whatever amounts allocated. I don't really care what happened previously, if there were misunderstandings, whatever happened. I think going forward, my position is I would probably like to keep it at 42, get a wage study, and then adjust the amount appropriately. And I think whatever's needed and appropriate for that magistrate should be funded. I wouldn't, oppose that, whatever the wage study said. I do think looking at a full-time magistrate and maybe even finding a way to coordinate with the court to make that possible is something I'd like to look at least. Because I think if we're not catching up or the caseload's growing or the amount of new cases coming in is growing, I'm concerned about that just continuing to increase as time goes on until maybe one day we get 2 judges and then it'll be more manageable, but that's my position on that. Does anyone have any other questions? Sure.
With respect to the magistrate, I know you said that you utilize the magistrate for warrants and things like that. On a weekly basis, how many hours is the magistrate currently working?
It really depends how many people are arrested the night before. He's there usually now 4 days a week. He gets there at 1, takes the bench right away, arraigns people, and he leaves. So
So he's
sometimes.
there daily then?
Yes,
He is there daily.
yes. And sometimes it's 1 hour, sometimes it's 2. On a really busy day, it might be 3.
Any other questions?
I would like to make one statement again, for the record, this may come into play next year. Revenue does matter because it goes into general fund, and that does drive our ability to pay, whether it's police, court, whatever. We do have a current budget deficit of a little over $300,000 before you add any expense. But keep in mind that we added an accountant position to the court that was supposed to bring in all this extra revenue, from bond forfeitures to collection of owed money. The budget, the court revenue budget was not increased, and they are going to come in approximately $300,000 short this fiscal year on the revenue side at the current trends. So that position has not fulfilled the obligation that the council approved the position for. Part of it is there are certain things that do take time, excuse me, take time to set up and get ready. But if we're in the same position a year from now, I will be recommending that that position be cut because it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. But so I want to, again, that being on the record, so there's no discrepancy 12 months from now.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
So I think I commented on this last year, and I mean, actually, Mr. Mayor, you already said that this time about comparing the revenue, strictly from the court versus the expenses of the court. I mean, we don't do this with, how much revenue does the finance department bring in? Or how much revenue does the fire department bring in? Yeah, you get checks handed to you, I guess, but you're not creating that revenue. But I don't even think I don't know. I don't want to discuss that. I think I think we've already discussed that last year, and I don't know. I think we just can't have that discussion. Like the state does want to do the statewide funding solution, so it's not this like, we need to, because what are we going to do? Mr. Blum, are we supposed to ask the judge to just fine people just to make up that amount? We're just supposed to make up fines, or, we don't want to just fine people just for fun.
Well, I mean, honestly, it'd be cheaper to get rid of 4 cops, quit writing tickets, and get rid of half the court staff. But we'd be ahead of the game.
Well,
But I mean, we're not here to write tickets. I get it.
and it's not our function to raise revenue for the city. That's the other part.
But I'm talking about a specific position brought in to bring in revenue. And if it doesn't, it needs to go.
Well, there's, at this point, there's not a recommendation so I don't think we have to get into that.
Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
Speaker, in regards to that position, I think with the previous administrator that was in the position, there was not a lot of homework done in that position when I came in the position, and we actually have the position. There is time, as Director Blum said, it does take time to set up partnerships. Right now, we're in the process of setting up a partnership with the Department of Treasury to collect outstanding costs and fines from years ago, not anything current, but fines that's owed to the court. But again, it shouldn't be based on revenue or anything like that. But just to touch on what Director Blum said, for that position, it does take time to get the necessary tools in place and partnerships to generate that revenue.
Well, and one other thing, there's been a lot of reasons why revenue has gone down, clean slate, there's, different matters that caused it to go down. But again, Yes,
Yeah,
Michael.
Judge just mentioned a good point. With the recent legislature that passed last year, auto set aside, which is the big clean slate initiative for the state. Misdemeanors, depending on the type of crime or severity of the crime, they're being automatically set aside by the state. With that new legislation, we're not able to collect revenue on those convictions that have been set aside by the state.
And one last thing, the reason I started out with the separation of powers, because I think, and my state court administrator said he would come down and have a little class for the council and for city administration to kind of explain the separation of powers and this position.
Excuse me,
Yes.
excuse my, she's saying she needs you speaking to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry for
Thank
interrupting,
you.
I apologize.
Yes. Now, lost my train of thought.
State court administrative
Oh,
office.
yes, that they will come in and kind of talk about the separation of powers. And I can put it in its simplest terms. The president doesn't tell the Supreme Court what to do. It's the same thing on a smaller level. The city is separate, the court is separate, and the problem lies with trying to control what's going on in the court. We're not a department head, we're separate and distinct branches of the government. And I think that's important for everybody to recognize that and to know a little bit about, how that works. And so if council is interested, we can have like a little seminar before a meeting and have Mr. McGrail come in and explain that, the talking points about the difference between separation of powers, the funding unit issues, reasonable and necessary expenses and things of that nature. And that might be good for everybody to kind of have a deeper understanding of, where we're at in this situation.
Yeah, we can talk about that. That's, for me, I totally understand you guys are just completely on your own over there, and we're just discussing what we'll allocate. But if the court's willing to do a wage study, I think maybe I would like to request that and come back and then, amend this line item.
In the meantime, we have the issue of going forward, having a magistrate to fulfill the role that's necessary for our court, for me to be able to do what I do.
Well, yeah, and
So I guess my ask would be approve it, and if we come back, if you want us to come back after a wage study and you want to revisit it, that's fine, but at least we have that position covered for the hours that we need to do what we need to do at the court, so that we're efficient in our administration.
I understand. I think I'm just on the other side of the issue, but because I do want to come back and actually revisit the issue sooner rather than later. And I think if the money is there, at least for the beginning of the fiscal year, there won't be any. I wouldn't foresee any problems operating. But are there any other questions?
Well, I was just gonna say, if we do a wage study, we should include many positions, not just one. We could have done the wage study last year when we went from 104 to 42. I don't know, wage study wasn't done when we reversed it, so now we're asking for a study to go back to where we were. So, but, I don't know, it was a long time ago, but we still are in discussion of the motion that I made and Councilman Curley seconded about changing it from 42 to 104.
All right, please call the roll. Oh,
Clarification on that. So the motion was, I apologize because we were all talking different numbers. The motion is to go from 42 to 104 for the magistrate position. Is that correct?
Yes.
yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
Go ahead.
Councilmember DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilmember Curley?
Yes.
Mayor Kleinfeld?
No.
Councilmember Shadlick?
No.
Councilmember Baker?
No.
And I know that's not what you want. I really do want to come back and revisit this issue. So I'm going to actually, Ms. Walton, if you can maybe do some research on, providing a person to conduct a wage study. And then I also think it should come out, I don't think it should come out of the court's budget. I don't think it's that expensive, but I mean, I think it's fair to say we'll pay for it if we're asking for it. Are there other issues that we need to, I know there was one contentious, but are there other matters you want to?
There was
Move on to.
there was one other issue with regard to legal fees, but I think we've resolved that. We asked for $15,000 in that line item. I think, has that been removed?
Yeah, we won't need the 15,000. If our consulting fees, if there's ever a need for a consultant, I think we could work with city administration to and come back to council to request that funding.
And the other issue, and they can talk to you about this from, when we do our SCAO little seminar, is that if there are legal fees, it is the responsibility of the city. That was confirmed to me. So we don't need that item in there. So I think that concludes our portion of it.
Did you have anything to add, Ms. Fulton, on?
So I don't know if you guys want to touch on, Mike, you had come over regarding the visiting judges, interpreter, and court recording change.
Yes.
Recording changes. So just for council, following the input, court had come over, I believe it was Friday, and had a couple changes that they're requesting to be made in their budget. One of those line items, is for their visiting judges, which is on page 15. The GL number is 101-286-801. They've asked to increase that line item from $6,000 to $10,000 to cover for when the judge is absent or away from the court for whatever reason. We also verified that MIDC initially, I think the court and the city were under the impression that MIDC was paying for interpreter costs, but we did get clarification that they're not. And so they did request to add $4,000 into that section for professional and contract services for interpreters, which is a need, and we concur with that. And then they'd also requested to reduce court recording costs by $1,000. The city does not oppose those changes and those recommendations made by the court. It'd be up to council to make that change in the budget.
So, change from 6 to 10 for visiting judges, 4,000 for contracting for interpreter services, and, I'm sorry, what was the third one?
There was a reduction of $1,000 for the court recording services.
So moved.
Is there support?
I'll support that.
Any questions on that? Please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilmember Curley,
Yes.
Councilmember Shadlick?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Mayor Kleinfeld?
Yes.
Mayor, if I have now that we voted on this and it was voted down, there's a couple of questions I would have. Randy, you spoke about the magistrate's cost in January was something in what line item, since the 42,000 was already spent, where did that come out of?
It's come out of part-time wages, so it's an unbudgeted expenditure. It will probably be double what the budget is by the time the fiscal year's done.
And so the 42,000, you'll start taking that salary for the magistrate out of that?
That's where it comes out of,
Yeah.
correct.
The other question I have, I don't know when we voted on that, it was some time ago, when the court came and said, oh, we got to have this guy because they're going to get on the phone and they're going to get all these funds that have been paid, and now you're telling me, well, it hasn't been set up and it takes a long time.
That's not,
Well, that's what he said. It takes a long time to set it up. So has he recovered any money at all?
no, what's happened is we asked for an employee. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, and I wasn't here for the last
Could
meeting.
you pull the
but-
microphone down? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. With regard to our new employee, she was a part-time employee, and what council approved was it going from part-time to full-time. And we do have her working on all the financial stuff, bond money has come in, so it's not that it's taken a long time. She's digging in, she's cleaned up a lot of the bond stuff, she, goes through files and looks for money that's owed to to the court. So she is doing that, and she's taken on the responsibilities of, the monthly reporting, paying the city, paying the county, paying the state. She does all that financial stuff for the court. And she's a very useful, good employee.
You want to reply to my question?
Yes, so, yeah, when council approved this position, I don't think there was a lot of planning with the previous administrator when they came into the role. When I came in the role, that was one of the things that I worked with to get this position. The previous administrator moved this into a regular clerical position, not a finance or accountant position, or just a financial clerk. Since I've been in the position as court administrator, we moved the position into actual finance analyst position to do the work of the financials of the court. So when we did this, we started getting the tools that is needed. One of the requests that you probably see in the BSA generated budget is a DMC collection module. That's something that we need to do the collection. We no longer need that as a request from the court, a request from city, the funding unit, as we were able to get that covered by the grant. But these are certain tools that they need to be in place to do the collection of those outstanding fines and costs that's owed to the court.
Okay. Don't repeat it. I don't have a clue what you just said, but that's fine. I'm done.
Any other questions? I would just request from our administration that, I don't know, maybe in a month or something, we put it on our agenda just to revisit it so it doesn't fall, between the cracks.
And although this is not on the agenda tonight, I just want to put it on everyone's radar to maybe put a committee together for the new building. And just by way of background, I've met with Senator Peters' office, John James' office, Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, Senator Kleinfeld, working on sources. I have received a bunch of different possible grants to go through. Was able to find out that we can, if you apply right, can get federal grants, and it's congressional discretionary spending, and that the Warren Police Department was paid all with federal funds. So I thought that was very, very positive. So.
I think that's great, and if you have ever information to share with us, I think we're looking into that too, so we should be working together to try to.
So if maybe we can do what we talked about, putting a committee together and start having regular meetings, we can share the information and, everybody can be on the same page as far as, and delegation of duties.
I am 100% for that if you
Okay.
guys want to set something up sometime soon.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to city attorney budget. Well, first I'll ask, does anyone have questions for Rich? I don't know if we need you to.
I'm happy to answer any questions this evening.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, then we'll just move on to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Building, rental, blight, and planning budget. Do you want to start this off as well? Then?
I can take it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So building, on the line item detail starts on page 35. So budget rental, and code, essentially you'll see are all split for their full-time staff between all three based on the amount of time that they spend in each individual department. There are no additional increases in funds. This is structured similar to the current fiscal year's budget with it being in-house. We are, fingers crossed, the building official was in today completing all of his paperwork. So by the end of the month, we should have a building official on board and ready to introduce to you guys. And then we'll continue with the hiring. We do have all four of our two full-time inspectors, two part-time inspectors that are onboarded. So we are nearing to be very close in ending services with McKenna. So what you see in the budget is essentially building department being fully in-house, but there's no increase in the level of service, meaning no additional staff that are budgeted, and no additional software or anything built into this section. So if you have any questions specific to building rental or code, I can certainly answer those, and then I can go into planning as well.
Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I think one quick question, so rental inspection, I think, let's see, page 36 on the line item. We had $0, I think, so that we'll be doing all rentals in-house then for professional services, I mean. They'll all be in-house after July 1 then?
Correct. Yeah, we should be in-house by the end of this fiscal year. That's the plan. We do have all of our inspectors that are on board. Right now, we're utilizing, because McKenna is still here, the training. So we have members of McKenna that do have the professional training in the rental inspections and the history in doing it. And so they're training all 4 of our staff and utilizing that crossover time. And as of July 1st, we should be fully in-house for all of our inspectors for rental as well.
Any other questions? All right. And did you want to move
Planning?
into the, yep.
In regards to planning, our McKenna contract for the planning department, so 2 separate agreements that we have with McKenna actually ends towards the end of next fiscal year. So our proposal is actually to hire a planner full-time in-house and to not utilize the contract services moving forward for planning. So we're proposing just the one full-time planner. And that's where you see the supervisor non-union at the $20,000, hiring them to offer the crossover time between the McKenna planner that we have and then the in-house planner, and then ending our our next fiscal year essentially with a full-time employee and ending our contract with McKenna for those services. And as of July 1st of the following fiscal year, we would have a full-time planner on staff as a city employee.
And I didn't look at this ahead of time. Do you happen to know what scale he's at? I assume he would be.
The plan offhand, I don't remember which grade that he's at, but this was essentially like a quarter of what it was. We were planning to hire in April timeframe, and then by the end of the fiscal year, essentially have that person onboarded and prepared for the next fiscal year to be a full-time employee. And then, so next fiscal year, we would budget full-time for the employee.
Any questions?
Well, I think I need some more information on this item. So, yeah, you're saying your proposals to have no contractual service with McKenna for planning and it to be in-house.
Correct.
Okay. Well, at this point, I would certainly not want to move in that direction. I don't know what, anyone else, I don't know, I would need to get more information about that, I guess. I must have overlooked that even, I did not realize that.
I mean, I do think it's fair for council to have a discussion separate and apart about whether or not we want to go in that direction. In terms of the budget, though, I mean, I would be okay with approving the budget as presented and then having that discussion. If we decide not to hire the person, then the money just stays there.
Correct.
Any other comments from council? All right. Moving on to clerks. Ms. Walton, did you want to open this up? Thank you.
So we're on page 7 for clerks and the line item budget. I'm sorry, my microphone wasn't on. We're on page 7 in the line item for clerks. So we have clerks, the election department, and then ranked choice voting department as well. Ranked choice voting, we initially put some funding in there for legal fees. I know City Attorney Albright was working with the attorney that we had for ranked choice voting, but I think everything's kind of set aside, so we did not budget anything in the upcoming fiscal year for ranked choice voting. In regards to clerks, we essentially budgeted with utilizing the clerks and elections. We have 2 elections in the coming fiscal year. We have the primary and then the general election in November. There is an increase that you'll see for the part-time expenses as it relates to our election workers. We do have the 9 days of early voting that is constitutionally mandated, which does increase our expenses with part-time employees to staff the early voting site for 9 days. So we do have a slight increase in that funding for both of those elections. That is a requirement of state and federal elections, and then our council will have the ability and the decision essentially for local elections if you'd like to wish to move forward with early voting for those. So what's presented is essentially the same level of service, no additional staff that are added. We did have some additional money placed for equipment, but very conservative to replace a printer that we do have, and then there is that slight increase for the staffing based on the additional requirements of the new constitutional amendments for voting.
Any questions on that? All right, thank you. And next, we have DPW. Mr. Palucci?
Oh, he's here.
Any questions? No, okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The Department of Public Works and Services oversees many different departments: water, sewer, major local roads, parks, maintenance, motor pool, building maintenance, rubbish, and special events. Under that umbrella, we have one director, me, 3 supervisors, 11 full-time laborers, 2 motor pool mechanics, 2 clerks, and 4 part-time laborers. No additional staffing is being requested this year. That's when you're supposed to applaud. So at that point, I'd like to start with major and local roads. Before I start with major and local roads, I'd like to mention that all our capital projects are based on what we need most and available funds. All projects are reviewed and designed by our engineering firm, AEW, and then, of course, brought to council for approval. I can take you through project by project or just answer any questions you may have on major and local roads today.
I don't know that we need you to go through each project. Does anyone want that?
Nope.
Does anyone have any questions?
I'll ask a easy question about one. The ash project, concrete, right? Not
Concrete,
asphalt?
correct, yes.
Okay. That was all.
Okay. Then we can move on to, or does that need approval? No.
No.
Kim's not even here. Oh, there she is. She
Go
took
ahead.
off. Okay, water and sewer. Before we jump into water and sewer, I'd like to mention that we are making history here in Eastpointe, right? We're replacing 100-year-old water mains along 9 Mile, along Gratiot, receiving a $10 million earmark grant for lead service lines. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and we should recognize this. With that, I can take you project by project or answer any questions you may have in water and sewer.
Well, I think an applause for, 980 have been replaced, 980 lead service lines. I think that is.
Good job, good job.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work,
Glad
but
for that,
it's going
too.
great. Thank you. Thank you. We brought on a construction coordinator, and Julie is doing a wonderful job. I think I heard her talking Spanish to somebody today. So I'm very pleased with her. Yes.
All right. Does anyone have questions?
I know the court needed interpretive services, so.
Julie's available. And on the payroll. Okay.
All right.
We'll move to parks. As you all know, we maintain 8 parks in the city. We do that with 1 park supervisor, overseeing a general contractor for most of the work. On May 8th, we did receive bids on that contract, and we're currently working on awarding that bid. We may see it at the next council meeting. John Kraus and Ian McCain are constantly working on grants for the parks, so that's very exciting because we just don't know what's going to happen on a day-to-day. If you've got any questions on parks, I can answer that as well.
I had a question. Was the supervisor position that's going to be vacated, was it in?
Yes, that is currently in the budget. I do recommend, so Just, I guess for context for everyone, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but Joe Marucci has accepted another position and will be leaving the city towards the end of this month. And so he is what's budgeted in parks for the supervisor non-union line item. And so there is a significant change. Administration has met with Darren. We do not plan on replacing the position. You would want to keep some level of funding as whenever the supervisors that he currently has, the two-level DPW supervisors, do works in the parks, they should be allocated here. But essentially, it would kind of equal out based on where they're funded in other departments.
Do you know what page that's on in the line item? 41?
41, yep, 41. And it's towards the bottom of the page. The supervisor non-union under parks is funded at $65,224.
I don't know if I'm mixing two things up. I mean, is that position now, are those positions union now, I know there was some changes with.
Yep, so they created a union this year, which included the park supervisor as well as the two other DPW general supervisors. We were very clear with the union in negotiations that once that position was vacated, we did not have an intent on refilling it. And so there is an amendment or an appendix essentially with that same language in the TA. We are awaiting the other side essentially to review before we bring that forward to council as a final version. But they are very clear in the intention on that position.
Okay. I guess the reason I ask is, should that be changed to supervisor union?
I think it's something you've got to change in like BSNA.
It's just a description. I can actually just remove non-union and then it's irrelevant whether the union or non-union, they're just supervisors.
And do we have an idea of how much money, so you want money in the budget so that if work's done in that department, it gets charged back to the correct department?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Do you have an idea of how much should remain?
Randy, what do you recommend? And I don't know, Darren, depending on what you assign your supervisor.
We haven't ironed out the details on that.
Somebody's going to have to be responsible for parks and managing the contract. So, I mean, what do you figure, half a supervisor?
That's what we thought, yes.
So
And I was going to take part of the workload as well.
Yeah, so with the new arrangement, you're still talking probably $40,000 that should be there.
And then on the flip side, the wages would decrease from the DPW then, right?
It'd be scattered throughout major, local, everywhere else they end up, yeah.
I guess we can leave it as is. I was hoping administration would not fill that position. I think maybe just giving that direction, we don't necessarily need to amend it. And we can find out how much it costs and then next year adjust it.
That's fair.
Any other questions? Or, I'm sorry, I might have interrupted you.
No, that's it.
I think for the capital improvement, we should clean this up a little bit according to the, those DNR grants we did and things like that. Where's my notes here?
I agree with the capital improvement, right? That's my biggest obstacle in parks is there are so many grants that are applied for that I don't know what project to do because it may be covered underneath that grant, right?
Yeah.
So it just holds me on those.
Yeah, I think we've got, let's see, well, we did the Spindler Park one, which was a match of 352, which isn't really in here unless we're counting there's electrical improvements and tennis courts, which is like $95K. But if we get that, that means we've got, $250,000 not budgeted that we'll be on the hook for. And then, the splash pad's fine, but we've got the $500,000 2 years out. I think maybe we need, well, I don't know what the timeline is. Do we need to move that up a year here? But then we do have that covered in a grant. I guess just it should be clear because we just put 500,000 out a few years, many years ago when we first talked about it. And then the 150,000 match for Shamrock Park's not in here at all.
Just for the timeline too, if I can, these were all compiled in January, February. So these were all prior to like doing the DNR stuff, so we can update all of that as of the more recent grants that we've received and what we've committed to.
Yeah, but some projects will get through. The mulch, the manufactured mulch, those type of projects will get followed through because those won't get covered in any grants. The roof on Kennedy, there was mention that a grant would cover that, but it has a hole in it and a tarp on it, so we need to proceed with those type of projects.
And I know with the, sort of when we approved the grant projects or applications, we understood we can't, if we got all of them, we did not have the funds to match them all. So I think for that, we'll just kind of, depending on what we're awarded, have to move forward from there.
Well, we don't have it in the current fiscal year budget, but we have it in general, I guess I'd say, right? This is what you're saying?
Oh, yeah, I mean, we haven't allocated, we haven't budgeted if we were to get all those matches. Do you have any other questions?
It's all for parks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Got a
you.
few more departments.
Before we move on, though,
No. A few more departments. How about motor pool? In motor pool, we have 2 certified mechanics. They work on everything from large diesel engines to the leaf blowers, everything in between. This year, we are asking for some DPW improvements in the garage. We've got broken windows, missing floor grates. We are currently down 1 mechanic right now, so we only have 1, but it's posted right now in MML. Any questions in motor pool?
I think maybe I had one question for Randy, though. I think we've got, let's see, page 80 in the line item. We've got a negative balance for the motor pool. Should we be spreading out the cost more, or what
the motor pool is accounted for as an internal service fund. So it's a loss on paper only because we have all the assets of the vehicles. The way the state looks at it is it's only in a deficit if the current assets are less than the current liabilities at the end of the year. So it's a paper loss, and we know it and we roll with it.
Okay, thanks.
Special events, no changes in the proposed budget in the special events. This is obviously Gratiot Cruise, Rare Sizzling Nights, Homecoming, Memorial Day parades, where we recoup all our labor costs from that event. And then rubbish, no change in proposed budget on rubbish. Priority is in 1 year now and about the same amount of complaints.
All right, any questions?
Are any of the complaints that recycling or compost?
They're all the same. They're the exact same complaints.
Same amount, you think, of those? Recycling,
I keep
compost going
track
into
of
the
them all.
garbage trucks?
I have them all on a spreadsheet when they come in. So, a lot of them are trash all over the road, right? Well, you can't put loose trash in the cans, and that's the reason, things like that.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, real quickly, we have learned there's a little bit of a education issue, because bulk is 3 items or more
Correct.
outside of the bins. And there's been a lot on Facebook on the residents page, just put it out. So it's something that we're working on, that we need to educate the residents that 3 or more bags, 3 or more this, whatever, then you have to call priority, make sure it gets picked up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The intermingling of compost and recyclables, that seemed to settle down. It's just the loose trash more of blowing out of the trucks because of the way the system picks up the carts and dumps them. And again, you're not supposed to put loose trash in a can. It's supposed to be in a bag.
All right. Any other questions from council? I think that was it for you.
That's it, thank you.
All right.
No, that's enough. Thank you.
You forgot your joke. Next time.
I don't know, I thought that you opened with a joke. Any questions?
The joke was, typical DPW day. First one in, last one out.
All right, moving on to, I guess, City Hall-wide special event budget. Is this for Randy or Mariah? Mr. Blau.
I'll take this one. The special event Darren already touched on. Citywide, City Hall is where any expenses for City Hall itself or any general fund expenses that we cannot attribute to a specific department go in this particular area. So we do have some labor expense for City Hall work. We do have a retirement amount, pension contribution, and that's non-public safety, general fund employee portion. And then some, repairs, phones, all that kind of fun stuff. Nothing too unique here. We are planning on one more HVAC unit. We've had to replace a few of those over the years. What do we at? 5 of the 7 now have been replaced. So we're gonna put one more in next budget year and hope that 7th one goes one more year. We'll see. But really not a whole lot in this particular area. I guess 15,000 has been added for some additional Christmas lights, as they always tend to burn out or wires get snipped and we need to continually replace. So I guess unless there's any questions, that's about it for that one.
The pension, and the 6 million, I'm looking at the IT department. Never mind, I have no questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that was from the state, that 6 million.
6 million is the state grant plus normal.
Any questions?
Sure, a quick question. Let's see, the citywide City Hall, what is we've got 25,000 for City Hall Gratiot Aurora replacement?
The shamrock that used to exist. We're assuming something's going to replace it, but we don't know what. So we're just putting a dollar amount in there as a holding spot.
All right.
Any other questions? All right, do you want to move on to the next? Or is that all you're handling?
Kelly will take finance. Didn't make her come here for nothing.
Yeah, it's just a show, right? Kelly Rao, Deputy Finance Director. Going to go over the finance, treasury, and assessing. They pretty much remain flat with the exception of increases based on negotiated CBAs, small increases for, audit services, and for treasury, there was a small increase for our investment banker. For assessing, a small increase for our assessing services, for contractual services.
Did anyone have any questions on this section? All right. All right, moving on to the next item. City Council Manager IT, Ms. Walton.
So we're back on page 3 of the line item for council. So we kept this consistent, and same with the, we kind of changed where the commission funding was coming from. We lifted that as the commissions essentially are appointed by council. I believe last year we moved those into the city council budget. Right now, beautification, ACDC, and the teen commission are essentially as similar to last year, what was funded. Council can certainly make amendments. We just kind of left it status quo, waiting for the direction from council. Memberships and everything else remain the same for city council.
Is there any questions?
I have one. With respect to the teen commission, does that even exist?
So the teen commission technically exists, but we don't have anyone appointed to the board. There was funding that was placed last year, so we just kept it the same, as they had allocated funding for once the commission had been appointed, for them to be able to, basically find ways, to learn how to, appropriate funding. Nothing was used from the current fiscal year, but we just kept it the same, at the same funding level, and we'll follow the direction of council on how you guys would like to fund the commissions moving forward.
And just to comment on that, maybe when the joint committee with the school board meets, we can talk to them about whether or not there's students interested in that. That was one of the things I was hoping to touch base with when we have our discussions.
I have another question, I'm sorry. What about this council office phone? That line item?
So that's so there's a phone that's in the council office that we get, essentially a portion of the phone bill gets allocated, but that's how all of our phones operate. So the phones that are utilized in the manager's office get allocated to that department. And so that specific phone just gets allocated, that's available for council use gets allocated to this department.
I'm sorry, I don't know where this phone is, or that it even existed. I'm sorry, I don't mean
So
to be,
just- no.
I honestly don't know, so I'm just asking the question.
Totally understand. So in this back hallway, there's a council office, and you guys have like an actual,
We do closed session in there?
nope, on the other side of the hallway. Yep, on the other side of the hallway, there's an office, but
We can show you after the meeting.
there,
We can have a tour.
but you can
Well,
always come in to, go ahead.
I think where you were going, if you want to make a proposal to just cut that line item, I would totally be in favor of that. I don't think anybody on this council right now uses it.
I was gonna ask.
I've never been in a room and don't intend to go into that room.
I didn't even know it existed, so
Yeah,
I obviously don't.
it's
How about you, Councilman Baker?
I have never used the phone. I don't even think I've touched it. It's never been in my way.
I mean, could we save the city $250 by getting rid of this? I mean,
What do we save?
Are you motioning?
I think that,
oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. What was that?
Yeah, no, you're right.
250, yeah.
Let's get rid of it. I
Yeah.
agree.
the only thing I've ever done in that office, I think was my first year on council, when Randy was showing Cardi and myself some changes with BSNA.
Oh,
And that literally, that's,
you've never shown me.
you probably didn't ask.
There is the computer access as well, so you have like a login that you'd be able to utilize the computer in the office and then log into the software programs as well.
No, thank you, but, you know.
Well, I have, so the BSNA software, we can only access that from City Hall, from that computer. So there is actually a legitimate reason. I mean, if somebody had some reason to use the phone, I guess I wouldn't be against it, but I don't think
A
anybody's
phone?
going to.
Seriously, I mean, I think you all have phones. I mean, you know.
I don't think anyone's fighting this.
No.
Well, go ahead and make the motion. I'll
I would
support it.
move that we remove, I'm sorry, where was it again?
Everything.
101-101-850.000, council office phone, remove that line item.
I'll second that.
I will too.
I left my phone at home today, guys.
I don't have a phone either.
Cutting the line right now.
All
Yeah,
right.
the two of us don't have phones.
You know, hey, it's all right.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Shadlick.
Yes.
I do believe it was Councilmember DeMonico.
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember Curley.
Yes.
Mayor Kleinfeld.
Yes. Do you have any other questions for that section?
No. Do you want me to propose one while you're looking, or?
Go for it.
I was going to suggest, we've had this budget for training for a long time of $1,500 each and $1,725 for the mayor. I was going to propose increasing it a little bit, maybe to $2,500 each, $3,000 for the mayor. It'd be like a total like $5,250 total. I don't even know the last time, frankly, that it has been changed, and you can use that up pretty quickly, you know, doing some MML stuff, and then maybe later in the year. You know, I've been using, for sure, my own money after, you know, going to one MML thing and then maybe half of one and it's spent. So just for future councils and for anyone else looking to do some more training, I think we get a large ROI on that. I think I've gained a lot of knowledge from doing training. So I guess that'd be my motion to change it to 2,500 each council person, 3,000 for the mayor. Yeah, that's my motion for the training budget.
All right.
Can I ask a quick, is that doable? Or it won't hurt us?
It won't hurt us.
Okay. That's all.
All right, please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilmember Curley, Mayor Kleinfeld?
Yes.
Councilmember Shadlick?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
All right, I guess I'll turn it back to you. Is there more?
Nothing left on council. We can go to manager. Manager status quo in terms of no additional staffing being proposed, and same membership, same training that is listed in previous years. But I can answer any questions that mayor council may have.
Does anyone have any questions? All right. I guess next would be IT.
Yeah, so, let's see, IT is on page 8 of our line item. We're currently in contract for IT services. So that is listed, that's our contractual increase in IT services. Our software maintenance is very similar to previous years in terms of our domain costs, as well as our server, Microsoft costs, and Adobe, and then our hosting fee for our website. And then we did put funding into the budget to propose. Usually, I believe it's every 5 years, there's a changeover to replacing the computers and monitors as they start burning out. We have experienced some of our staff, specifically here in City Hall, that are having difficulty in needing computers that are replaced. So we do have that as phase 1 for $100,000 to propose that implementation over the next fiscal year.
Any questions? All right. And next we have, I guess, it's personnel budget, is that, do you want to
Yep.
touch on that? Okay.
Personnel and civil service. So civil service is slated at the same.
Yeah, sorry, audio visual, I think, was in there. It's kind of IT. I just had one quick question about that.
Sure thing.
Can we just, when we first, or when we moved to this new system, we were going to try, well, it allows us to Zoom people in, and I think there's been scenarios at meetings where that's would have been helpful. Can we attempt that at some point, in preparation for if it'd be much easier to, Zoom someone in instead of them traveling all the way here or something like that?
Absolutely. We actually have them coming in to provide a training to our community engagement manager, our new administrative specialist, and then another backup. And so that is one of the things that we can certainly touch on.
Okay, thanks.
I like that idea. It's good.
You thinking about zooming in, Mr. Reed?
I will neither confirm nor deny.
All right, go ahead.
Civil service, we proposed, again, very similar to our current fiscal year. It's kind of determines on the amount of change in full-time employees that we have and the mandated postings that we have for the position that is up. Moving into personnel, I did make a recommendation for a $8,000 increase to the supervisor line item. The city has never, other than the manager, had an HR position or an HR manager position to fulfill it. And so I'm proposing actually the financing piece to increase to a grade 7 position based on the responsibilities and what that job has transitioned into. Again, further, that would actually require us to go to civil service. I would be open, as council had mentioned earlier, to do a wage study across the board for non-union, and if you'd like to wait and do that, we could certainly do that as well. I'm open to that, as I think many of the non-union positions could use. And we can also do that in-house through MML, if council is open to that. But I know this is one of the positions that has had an increase in responsibilities that is not current and related to the previous position that it has fulfilled. So other than that, we also propose to do an HR policy and procedure update in regards to personnel. Again, historically, it's only been the manager in an HR position, and then the assistants that were in the office assisted with some of the paperwork, but the policy and procedures haven't been regularly updated and maintained. And so similar to, I believe, 2 years prior, we had individuals come in and do the same thing kind of with the police department. So we're wanting to do that on the personnel side and ensure that all of our policies and procedures are up to date. I mean, even boiling down to, we are required per ADA to have hard copy applications. Our hard copy application actually asked questions that were illegal, and so we've had to redo that application that has actually been in our office for several years. So there are things like that that we want to make sure we're in compliance with, and so we do propose the $10,000 to have an organization come in to review all of our policies and make a recommendation to implement and update those policies. Other than that, a couple years ago, we did transition over to Insight to do online applications. So that is a NeoGov expense on page 12. And this year, or last year, council approved us to utilize the LEARN system, which is a training system that is connected to NeoGov. So we now have both of those modules within that system. So that is essentially the same level of service that we have, and that is actually being rolled out. We were able to get that up and running and actually transitioned in, and so we can actually roll that out this year with training. So we propose continuing that, and then education, we actually have provided consistent training in the past year for BSNA, for our staff here, as well as actually throughout the entire city. So even just this year, we provided training through BSNA for citizens' requests for action, building department, business licensing, and building department, just so that we're all, especially as we transition through staff, we're all on the same page and utilizing the system in the same manner. With that, Mayor, Council, I can answer any questions that you have for personnel and civil service.
If I may, I actually really appreciate the suggestion for the wage study. I think, I don't know when the last time one was done, but I don't recall one. So I think doing one across sort of administration citywide and also would save us money to roll it in with doing it with the court. I would probably prefer to keep the personnel department wages the same until the study comes in. What does the rest of the council feel?
I think that sounds fair.
Yeah.
So should I make a motion to keep it the same, because I think it's in your proposed? I'll move to keep the personnel allocations for wage the same in Department 270, sorry.
Second that.
Please call the roll.
Mayor Kleinfeld?
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilmember Shadlick?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Curley.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Just for clarification, is the council comfortable starting a wage study now if we identify organizations that can do it? Are you wanting to do it in-house? Is this something that you're wanting to wait until July 1st? Just so that we have direction as administration on how you'd like to move forward on that.
I think we should get started immediately, but perhaps maybe if there's different options, you know, if we have to approve a contract or choose someone, maybe bring it up at the next meeting.
Understood, thank you.
Maybe another brief question about this area. Is NeoGov's really $30,000 per year? It seems like a lot. I think it's, I guess I'll say worth it, right? So it does the job postings, and do we do like performance evaluations and stuff like that through that? Because at least I know we do it.
No, so we haven't, I think they have like 6 or 7 modules. We haven't utilized or requested to utilize all, because it is a very expensive service. We only do the online applications, but that also provides it, essentially hosts all the applications and maintains it as we're required to have all of that documentation. It also does the process of like the civil service eligibility list, and so as we score them, we can actually create that into the system. It also does the notification process that we're required, so we can do automatic emails that come out of the system to let them know when we receive the application, if they're moving forward and what step they're in. So full-time employees, we have the expectation of an initial test, so it sends a notification of that. Anyone that passed the test, we send a notification that they've passed the test, and then you move to an oral board, we send those notifications. So it essentially moves us into the 21st century of doing all electronic notifications, where we used to send actual mail to people's houses to let them know that they had passed the test and to schedule interviews for the notification process. So it is an expensive service, but we are being very conservative in the modules that we utilize based on the operation of our department.
Okay, yeah, no, it is more than I thought it did, even though job postings, that's how I found my current job, was actually through essentially NeoGov, the governmentjobs.com, so, you know, I guess it works. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think that's it for you, right? Okay. So the next item is going to be the appropriations ordinance. I don't know, does council want to take a quick break before we finish this up, or should we just go straight to it?
I'd like to just go straight through,
All right,
unless you have to go to the bathroom.
we can keep going.
Okay.
All right, would anyone either like to make a motion or discuss this?
Maybe if I could, yeah, I'll be happy to jump in real quick. I guess a question, maybe going back and forth too much in my notes and could have asked earlier, but about water and sewer rates. I guess just from a high level, without like digging in too much to like the different numbers or different pages in the line item, I thought maybe, and I guess Mr. Blum or Ms. Walton, whoever, you know, could answer, with the 10 million we got for lead service lines, we were doing $1 million a year, right? To replace them, I guess essentially we're not going to use that until we're done with the 10 million. We expect to have like 4 million, I think was the current estimate, right, left of replacements to do after the 10 million. And then I asked a few questions, you know, via email. I thought some of in the water department, there was like a couple $100,000 extra in sidewalk that I didn't know if we needed that. And then we increased the target amount for the operations from 2.5 to 2.8 million. So there's like another 300,000. So I guess I'm surprised we're increasing so much again. And I think it's 3%? Originally, you proposed 9.4% increase, right? Now it's 7.3. With us, I think we could be, well, there's $1 million less in the proposal here, but I think there's another 500,000 maybe that doesn't need to be in the budget. I don't know, just seems like, I guess, in general, large increases still, when like GLWA is not increasing, I guess SMSD decreased, and that's why it went from 9.4 to 7.3, mixed water sewer increase. I guess, can we address that, or, yeah, I guess that's basically my question.
Is Darren still over there?
Yeah, all right, I can see
I
his
think
chin.
he's hiding under the desk. Yeah.
I'll let him address the concrete. The one thing, and I think I mentioned it in the information that went out, but since last year's budget setting and rate setting, we approved labor contracts. So there was a 5% increase that wasn't factored into last year, and there's another 5% here July 1st. So there's a 10% increase in labor cost, which on the water side is the bulk of the expense. The water from GLWA is the smallest amount in the water rate. The sanitary district did come in, it did increase, it just increased less than my original estimate. So there's still an increase in that, along with labor cost within the sewer side. But I'll let Mr. Palucci address concrete.
Well, I did address the concrete. Let me just first say it's very odd talking to nobody because right up here. So I did address in my email that you were referring to the concrete. That was actually in the sewer departments that we doubled the rate, or we doubled the budget amount. And we really didn't double the budget amount because I sent in the email, previous years, we were spending, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was 101, and then the year before that, it was 89,000. So really, I was just adjusting the budget to what it should be. And again, that was the sewer fund, which catch basins go into the sewer fund. And, you know, we've been repairing a lot of these catch basins in-house, which means our contractor is doing the cement repair rather than we make it a project and then that concrete gets done by, you know, included into the projects.
I guess so the number I was looking at wasn't in sewer though, it was in water. The pavement repairs on, it's, what page am I on?
Was it
70.
592537 or 592538? I live by GL numbers.
Yeah, 937. Yeah, on page 73.
I don't have that in front of me anymore.
Okay.
But I thought that amount was $400,000.
Yeah.
And
it's
to date,
underwater.
we've only spent, I think, the last time I looked at it, it was 38,000. So I just kept the amount the same, but I don't expect to use that much, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so I guess if we are talking about the same line item, the 937.537.
Okay, that is water.
213,000 was the activity in '23, and then our amended budget for this year is 400, and then our recommended's 400, but you're saying we've only spent like 40 grand this year?
It is,
in water?
yeah. So, and then that list I sent you, that spreadsheet I sent you with that email, was all the concrete that we will be doing. Some of it is water, and there's notes in there. Some of it is water, some of it is sewer. I don't expect it to be, I mean, it's hard to guesstimate, but 80, 90,000 at most. And then the fiscal year will be over with.
Okay, well, I guess that's 300,000 higher than we need it to be in the line item right now, I guess then, Mr. Blum?
It is. But again, I just kept it status quo
Yeah.
from year past.
It seems like the current fiscal year might be high. It really depends
Okay.
on how many water main breaks we have.
And I did that.
And it's a bit of a crapshoot on that.
35
Sure.
water main breaks to date from January 1st to today.
How many you said, sir?
35.
35. Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah. How much change, I think we talked about this in years past, if we did want to, and I think you might have known off the top of your head, Mr. Blum, if we went from, you know, like a 7% increase to a 6% increase, what is that difference in revenue, basically?
Well, I don't have 6%. I ran a couple scenarios. Right now, at the 7.3, operation would be a net 15,000. So you're talking, you know, minimal in the overall scheme of things. If you did 0, the water sewer fund would lose 875,000. If you did 4%, it would lose 395,000. So 6%, you're probably looking at losing 150 to 200,000. But if you just concrete, if you took concrete from 400 to 200, you're probably going to end up right around 6% anyways.
Okay.
Do you want to suggest any changes?
Well, what's everyone else think, I guess?
I mean, I think I would be okay with knocking it down to 6%. But what's the rest of council feel?
If we did that, then you said we would have to drop the concrete cost from 400 to.
Yeah, it sounded like the director was okay with that.
Is the director okay with that?
Yes, I am. I'm okay with that.
So we drop it to 200,000 on concrete and then keep the rate at 6% and I can recalculate it before, second reading.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I will motion we introduce and give first reading to ordinance number 24-1236, which provides for the annual appropriations and tax levies for the city of Eastpointe for fiscal year 2024 to 2025, and schedule the ordinance for a second reading and consideration of adoption at the regular city council meeting on June 18th, 2024, and will, between now and then incorporate the change we just discussed with the water and sewer rates.
Is there support?
Support.
Any questions? Please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilmember Curley,
Yes.
Councilmember Shadlick?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Mayor Kleinfeld?
Yes. Next, we have mayor and council reports. Mr. DeMonico.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, everyone, for coming out, and I think I like that we schedule two and then get rid of one, and it feels like we're ahead of schedule and have a free evening now the next day. I'm sure nobody else minds that, especially since it's only been 2.5 hours. So thank you, everybody, for doing all the work doing the budget, and I guess I'll see you guys next week.
Okay, Councilwoman Shadlick.
We'll keep it short. I want to thank everyone for the hard work on the budget and for being so patient and explaining things. Thank you.
Councilman Baker.
I'm sorry. Oh, you said me?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't catch the name you said. I'm sorry. I will echo the same sentiments and kudos on a very efficiently run meeting and on not having to come back tomorrow.
Thank you. Councilman Curley.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad we don't have to come back tomorrow, but kudos to whoever did this budget. It's an incredible amount of work and compromise. And all we do is sit here and it's already a finished project just about. So I appreciate that. One thing outside of the council, folks, for our VIP parade, of which you all said you're going to be in it, I'm desperately looking for convertibles. I'm short 22 convertibles right now. So I may have to double or triple people up, but I don't want to do that. So if you know of anybody that would like to be in a parade, they'll get a free T-shirt, $20 value, if they get in there. So.
All right.
Other than that, Mr. Mayor, I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who worked on the budget and to everyone who came out to our meeting to speak to us. We appreciate your time. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Call the roll.
I'm going to go with Councilmember Baker,
With who?
Yes.
Councilmember Curley, Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Mayor Kleinfeld,
Yes.
and Councilmember Shadlick.
Yes.
All right, meeting adjourned at 8:35.
Did you call my name? I didn't answer.